Hello everyone and welcome to episode 2 of my 1973 Datsun 240Z restoration. In this video I hope to accomplish a couple things. I want to get the transmission out of the car, get started on taking the interior apart, and getting that stuff all kind of bagged up and tagged. And we're also going to talk about a couple things that I've discovered and some things I'd kind of like to share a little bit of insight on as far as things I've already actually got off the car and things that I've done and so on. So I'm going to go ahead and start showing you what I've got. Alright, so first things first, I've already gone ahead. I've removed the intake and the exhaust from off of the engine. I had actually done this probably about a year and a half ago or so. And what I had to do is I also had to replace all of the studs on the block because they were old and crusty and a couple of them actually snapped whenever I was removing them just because they've been 50 years old and they'd seized up. But what I've done here, I've already removed the exhaust and the intakes. And that is partially giving me better access to the transmission because I'm going to be removing the transmission separate from the engine because I am in a one-car garage and I don't think I'm realistically going to have access with the engine crane coming in to grab it, pulling this all out as one separate unit or as one single unit. I don't think I'm going to be able to do that. So what I'm going to do is remove the trans from the car so that way I can just pull the engine straight up and out. Now, part of the setup that I've been running on this car are a pair of 4-screw round top SU carburetors. This would have come on your very early 240Zs, so like a 70 or a 71, those Series 1 model year vehicles. I had these completely cleaned up and rebuilt and also rebushed on the throttle shafts, as you can see back here, by Apple Hydraulics out in New York. Very pleased with the service that I had done. They did a good job. These ran phenomenally better than they were prior to that after I just tried rebuilding them and I couldn't actually do the throttle shaft myself. A very fair price and a very, very quick turnaround. I think I got these sent out and back within about a month and a half, as opposed to the other very commonly marked, very commonly named Z Therapy, who does also specialize in round top 240Z carburetor restorations. Whenever I had inquired about their services, they had told me that I was looking at like 18 months to get my carburetors done, which I just was not willing to wait for. So I'm very pleased with the work that Apple Hydraulics did. I'm not super deep cost-wise into this set of carburetors, maybe about $1,000, including buying the carburetor cores and then having them shipped out and remanufactured. So I'm pretty pleased with these. So if you're looking to have your carburetors done and you don't want to wait for Z Therapy, I would inquire to Apple Hydraulics. Again, I'm very pleased with them. I believe they specialize in both Datsun carburetors as well as old Volvo carburetors. So if that's something you're interested in, check them out. Now, moving on to the exhaust. The setup that I have for this car was a pretty inexpensive one. This is a pace setter header. I don't remember where I purchased it from. I bought it online. I don't remember where I purchased it from, but this is a pretty well one of the less expensive ones that you're going to be able to get. And as a result, I didn't quite get the right one. They have 2 square ports here in the center and round everywhere else, whereas for my model year of the car, it's all square ports for the exhaust. So not quite right, but realistically not causing an issue for me. It still bolts up just the same. Going to behind that, oh, and as well with this, since it's the wrong one, it's not shaped correctly for the floors going down this way. So the modifications I had to do included hacking slices out of this and bending it out of the way. That's why you see these very ugly welds, but they don't leak and they work for what I was doing. I have a cheap glass pack, supposed to act as kind of a resonator, really is doing basically nothing. Kind of regret putting that in there, but nonetheless, it's there, it's staying. Going to the back, bought a cheap 2.5-inch kit off of Amazon. Comes with a bunch of different bends, some straight sections, so it was pretty easy to shape up into the same factory orientation. And at the very back, I have a moderately priced, I think this was like $150-ish or so, little Flowmaster muffler. It was the biggest one that I could possibly package into the back of the car where the stock exhaust muffler goes, because I had a straight through exhaust on it and it was atrociously loud. So this one is a baffled setup, so it's much quieter. There is a little bit of a drone with this whole setup, you know, right around the 2,000 RPM to like 2,500 mark. Not my favorite exhaust in the world that I built myself, but you know, when time comes and I have the money, probably going to go to a more tested and proven setup to hopefully eliminate some of that drone that I do have going on here. Now, on to the third thing that I've discovered and want to share with you pertaining to the motor. Let me walk back around here. I removed my intakes, and whenever I was just looking in at the valves, just getting a basic inspection, because I haven't had this off for about 6 months or so now, started looking. You can kind of see in the exhaust ports, the first 3 are a little bit different color than the rear 3. So I'm not an expert in diagnosing how engines are running based on, the colors of the soot or whatever you want to describe it as coming out of the exhaust. My guess is that the fronts are running leaner than the backs. Don't know what that means. Those are running at the right fuel ratio, and those are running too rich. Not 100% sure. I don't have O2 sensors. That's part of my plan for this car over the winter. At least put an O2 sensor in here, kind of to help me tune the carburetors and get them running right. But I looked into the intake ports. Okay, those 6 round holes right there, the intake ports. Looked into those because I wanted to see, what do they look like? What's going on? Looking inside, they are pretty oily. I do have the PCV routed into the intakes, and this is an old motor, so it's probably got a little bit of blow by, pushing some oil vapors into there, oiling those up. But you're probably not going to be able to see this. But inside runner number 6, back there on top of the valve, yeah, you definitely can't see that. But what I did find is that there was a little bit of coolant sitting on top of the intake runner, which is clearly a problem. So what this means for me at the very least is that I'm going to have to do a head gasket on this engine, simply because that is something that's probably due with about 110,000 miles on this car. 50 years old, it's probably due for head gasket. I'm hoping that solves my issue, and that's the only thing that has caused coolant to get on top of my intake valve. But realistically, I don't believe that. It's probably going to be something where there's a small crack in the cylinder head. That's much more likely to have caused the coolant to get into the intake, because originally on these cars, you did have coolant running in through the intakes. However, with that, I deleted that system because it was already all plugged up anyway on this car. So that's realistically not what's causing my issue. It's going to be either a crack in the head, or somehow I've got coolant leaking into the cylinder, blowing back up past the intake valve, and then resting on it just conveniently whenever I took the intake manifold off. I still have to obviously go through the engine and see what's going on in there to figure out what my issue actually is. So that will be coming whenever I finally get the engine out on a stand and I can start inspecting it and see what's going on, and then we'll go from there. But that is something I did find. So, that is something, if you're interested, want to see how to do a head gasket on a 240Z, that's something that's going to be coming on this channel, most likely. So stay tuned for that. But now, anyway, done talking about that stuff, and I'm going to move on to going ahead and starting to pull the transmission. All right, so as far as pulling the transmission goes, the things I've already done is I've already drained the transmission of any fluid that's in it, or the vast majority of all of it. And I have cracked the bell housing bolts loose while they're still attached to the engine, or while, the trans mount is still in place. Crack those loose just so I know they're going to come free before I actively start trying to remove the transmission. So those are good. I still need to remove the shifter. I don't believe it's truly necessary to get it out before you actually pull the transmission, but it's probably going to make my life easier. I pulled the hardware that is holding the center console in place. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to get underneath the car and remove the drive shaft. And then I'm going to come in here, pull the center console up, remove the shifter, and then from there, I'm going to go back in under the engine bay, or into the engine bay, crack those bolts a little bit looser, throw a jack under the car, under the transmission, so I can hold that in place when I crack the trans mounts loose. I'm not going to have the trans mount come loose first, because that's going to put a lot of stress on those bolts that are holding the transmission to the engine. I don't want to risk cracking the bell housing or damaging the bolts or damaging the threads. So that is my order of operations that I am going to pursue with this. So here we go. It's hard to show this whenever you're under there, but make sure you mark with some paint lines where your drive shaft was oriented, where it bolts up to the differential, because these are balanced. And if those balances aren't in the right places, your car is probably going to have a vibration. All right, so the center console is out. Really not too difficult. There are a few little bolt and screw holes that hold it in. Be careful with your console. It's 50-year-old plastic. Mine was already cracked, so I really wasn't too worried about it. I'm going to try to fix it, but nonetheless, be careful with it. Drive shaft is out, so I'm going to get the shifter out of here and then start pulling the trans. All right, so down here underneath the car, I've already got all the bolts off of the trans. I've got the trans cross member out right there, as well the speedo cable and the reverse switch is unplugged. So this is definitely gonna be easier with two people if you have access to a second set of hands, but I'm gonna try to go ahead and drop this down on my own. All right, so I do have the transmission out of the car, and if you're gonna do this job on your own, I would definitely advise getting an actual trans jack. It's gonna make your life a heck of a lot easier because this was a monumental pain trying to do it with just my floor jack right there and trying to work it down safely, because this thing really just wanted to roll around and not really comply with me or do what I wanted it to do. But nonetheless, it is out. One thing I also found is you should probably use an engine sling if you're gonna pull this out on your own or separate from the engine, because the engine, as you can now see, is kicked back pretty good. If your engine mounts are in better shape, they might actually hold this a little bit more in its original orientation. And also, I think my radiator hose is still got some give to it, so I don't think it's under that much tension. But I think it might be partially what's keeping this from rocking all the way back. But nonetheless, I've got the trans out of the car, so that is one less thing I need to do to this so I can get the engine pulled out. What's left for me getting ready to get the engine out, I need to buy an engine stand for one, but still get the hood off and probably take off the bumper and the grill just so I can kind of reach in here with more ease to pull this out. But with that said though, I do think what I'm gonna start on next is going back inside the interior of the car, probably pulling out the driver's seats and maybe just kind of tagging up some more random bolts in there. Just to kind of start getting that a little bit further apart, because I think I'm probably going to save taking the fenders and the hood and all that stuff probably for another video, maybe the next one, maybe whatever point I choose to do that one, because I'm basically going to be doing all the work that I can on this car, you know, in my time that I have to work on the car, but basically whatever order kind of makes the most sense for me with the limited space I have and the time that I've got. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump in there. It's probably gonna be 4 bolts per seat, and yeah, you'll see that in a second. All right, so going inside here, you do have 4 bolts that are holding the seats in, or 4 nuts, I should actually say. But down under here, you can just see that little nut and stud, that's what holds it on. There's 2 of those in the front, and then in the back, you got pretty much the same thing. I'm hoping you can kind of see it, but see a little black nut right there? That is a little stopper, effectively, and then the nut that holds the seat into the body of the car is right below that, or right above that. I've got a couple small victories right here once I've got the seat out of this car. So under the seat, I found a few cool things. One is the original fuse changer, which would go with the glass fuses in the fuse box. So that's a cool little find, useful as well. The on the road 40-piece socket set. This thing is old. Look at this sticker up here. This is a 1/4 3/8 socket set for $10 freaking. That's a cool little find. It's just hanging out underneath the seat. Probably older than I am. And an old pull tab. You know, this car got used. All right, so both of the front seats are now out of the car. Nothing else too crazy as far as finds under the seats. This car was fairly clean whenever I purchased it. I mean, it's not full of trash. It's still very rusty underneath. However, I think this is pretty well where I'm going to leave the interior for the moment, because I think either the next video is going to be me completely tearing the interior apart, getting the dash out of it, getting the rest of the carpeting, the interior panels, getting all that stuff out of it, bagging it up, tagging it, make sure I know where all it goes. Or it might be me starting to tear the front end of this apart. That way I can pull the motor out of the car, because I'm going to need to obviously take the hood off to get an engine crane in here to pull the motor up and out. And what that also is going to entail me is probably going to be pulling off the front bumper, the grille, maybe the headlight buckets. I don't really think I'm going to need to, but I might anyway. But just so I've got the space to get the engine puller in, grab the engine, take it up and out, set on an engine stand, and from there I can leave the issue of the potentially failed head gasket, potentially cracked head, for another day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this video up right here. I appreciate you guys watching it. If you want to follow along in places other than just on here, I do have a TikTok and an Instagram. Both of them are The Camborghini, all one word, spelled pretty much like it sounds. I think both of them are pictures of me with my Miata, so it should be fairly easy to spot. But on there, I'll be posting stuff, you know, pictures of the car on TikTok, little videos of the car, you know, kind of as I do stuff. This should all be fairly in order. I can't promise that it's all going to come out exactly on the same timeline. So if you want little sneak peeks, you're probably going to catch them on either Instagram or on TikTok. But I'm going to stop rambling here. I appreciate you guys watching. This is going to be a lot of fun for me and for hopefully for all of y'all to see this car kind of get rebuilt and reborn and how it's done. If this is something that y'all want to take on at some point in your own lives. So that's it. Thank you for watching. Take it easy.